Who's Amadou?
Someone who has three passions in life. I was trained as a software engineer.
Are you saying coding is obsolete?
Massively, people are getting fired because of AI. Why are people saying Africa is not ready for AI? The global ecosystem around AI is not ready for Africa for three reasons. Reason number one.
Amadou, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here, Abraham. Thank you.
You'd be telling me about Ethiopia a lot. So why choose Ethiopia?
Less of an opportunity, but more of coincidence than destiny.
All
Here's why. Ethiopia is one of those countries that are interesting where we have compute power for Bitcoin mining. Coming to Ethiopia is not long term. And the perfect example, the person who showed it to us, who's not Ethiopian either, is Dangote. If the richest black man on the planet is in it for the long haul, who are we?
Is the Ethiopia you made the Ethiopia you imagined?
Yeah, it's the same. Very consistent. You watch Coming to America?
Definitely.
For me, it was Coming to Africa.
Wow.
Yeah, it was literally that way. So people were telling me crazy. Like, bro, you're going to Ethiopia. There's not even internet connection. You want to build a tech company in Ethiopia? What's going on? I'm one of those entrepreneurs. If it's not challenging enough, I'm not for it.
What is the state of Amadou now and Gabea as a company in Ethiopia?
AI is the next big thing that Gabea is really tackling. We've been quiet about it. We call ourselves the best of African talent.
How long do you think it would take an African to believe in Africa? Amadou, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here, Abraham. Thank you.
One of my favorite things is to think about individuals saying someday talk to them. I was actually introduced to you by a friend of mine. He mentioned your name, and not only mentioning your name, he talked about you all the time. So I was like, who's this guy? And I wanted to know a lot about you. Who's Amadou?
Okay, you want the long version or the short version?
The longest
the long
version.
We'll finish up the podcast. Okay, Amadou is someone who has three passions in life, right? That's what dictates at least what I've been doing the past 15 to 20 years, yeah?
All right.
I have passion for technology. That's how I was trained. I was trained as a software engineer, building products back in the US, eventually bring it back to Africa, and that's the first thing, technology.
Okay.
Second linkage is Africa. Africa is the second passion. Everything I do revolve around making sure Africa is globally competitive, pretty much, right? We are so far behind. The idea, how do we contribute to make sure that we can compete globally? The third one is these people, right? So if you follow the logic, without necessarily having the right people behind Africa, then you won't be able to achieve whatever vision we have, right? So with people, I can be more specific. I can be more specific around talent, right? Which can be anywhere from an entrepreneur to someone who create, like a creator, someone who has a skill that they sell to the world. So anybody that revolve around talent is pretty much the third category of my passion, right? So when you combine those three things, it dictates, who I am, the vision, anything I do, the company I lead. And yeah, that's pretty much
okay.
it. Yeah.
I'll come to the technology part, and I know where you focus on around there, and we'll be actually talking a lot about that. But I see you're in Ethiopia for the right reason. So tell me all those things. So when you introduced yourself, when I asked you to talk about yourself, I was expecting that you'd be telling me about Ethiopia a lot. So why choose Ethiopia?
Why not?
All right.
That's the short answer. It was a coincidence, maybe destiny. Less of an opportunity, but more of coincidence than destiny. Here's why. Throughout my career in the US, right, as this engineer that were, jumping from company to company, right? One of the things that were a challenge for me was, how come every company I work at as an engineer, you'll have Americans, but you also have a lot of Asians, right? Whether they're from India, Pakistan, Vietnam, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Very few you would encounter another African, right? If you did, then you should become buddies at the firm, right? So how come we don't have our say, right, into this technology world? So that started really eating me out, yeah? In a sense, I said, okay, you know what? My grandfather is an entrepreneur. My dad is an entrepreneur. I need to go back to Africa and start a company. You watch Coming to America?
Definitely.
For me, it was Coming to Africa.
Wow.
Yeah, it was literally that way. So the question is which country to pick. I looked at West Africa. Some of my origins are from there, specifically Senegal. And the French part wasn't too much for me. You know, when you in an American system, it was there, but and again, the country was too small at the time in terms of what I wanted to do. Then I looked at Ghana, right, which is prominent into the tech space in Africa, and then heard about Kenya. Kenya was the limelight, right? It was what they call Silicon Savannah, right? That's where startups were being born and stuff. And as I was looking at all of those three countries, somehow I had a friend in the US whom we used to play basketball together, who happened to be from Ethiopia, right? It was more of that. But we never saw each other in the US. I'm from here, I'm from there. We just either Black or Africans, right? And they said, well, why don't you just check out Ethiopia? I was like, Ethiopia in tech? It was very sort of not something I was looking forward to, right? So, and then at some point I said, you know what? I thought I knew Africa because, you know, I grew up in a couple of African countries, Niger being one of them for 7 years and Senegal and so on and so forth. I thought I knew Africa through those lenses, right? And then what you hear from the news, and, you know, but then you had friends in the US you went to school with, right? From Nigeria, from Ethiopia, from you had your own African Union, but still you don't really know what Africa is. So the coming to Africa was like, you know what, let me go back to Africa and rediscover my continent. Not just the country that I think I'm from, but the entire continent. So I took a year off from work and traveled to as many African countries as possible. Of course, started off in Senegal, went to Mali, went to Ghana, went to Nigeria, went to Kenya, and Ethiopia came to play. I actually asked my dad, okay, I'm about to go to Ethiopia, and happened to be in the US at that time. He said, well, before you go to Ethiopia, let's go meet someone who can tell us about Ethiopia. So at the time, it was during Obama's administration. There was a gentleman who used to run I'm not sure if I can mention his name here, but maybe I'll not, but you can later on maybe put it up. But he ran the global partnership for Obama's administration, happens to be in Ethiopia. He'll tell you the story if you meet him one day. So I went to I met him in DC at his office with my dad. We met him, we chatted, and he was so humble. It's like, you brought your dad to decide if you want to go to Ethiopia? It was very, very sort of humbling. And from then on, I was like, okay, I'm getting closer. So you know how destiny is, right? And then I asked my mom, my mom told me, hey, by the way, you have family in Ethiopia.
Wow.
Right? You have 2 uncles there, and, they got children and whatsoever. And he ran a very prominent company in Ethiopia at the time. He still does. But so I was like, okay, I put 1 and 2 together. And then I met a friend who ended up being my co-founder of Gabea. We met in Silicon Valley at an event, diaspora event, and we connected. So with all of those sort of, back and forth of thinking about going to Ethiopia, I decided to come. So there was another gentleman who sponsored that trip to Ethiopia. So it's a tech conference we organized in 2014 at the Global Hotel at the time, right? Where we had all the possible students who study computer science, information system, blah, 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 come to this conference for a whole day where we did a lot of sort of workshops, talks about the new technology that you guys are discovering today. We talked about AI, cloud computing at the time in 2014. And when I came, it was over 500 people. 95% of them were maybe in their 20s, 20, 24. I said, who's going to sort of support all these computer science students in IS? What is the structure in Ethiopia? It bothers me. So knowing, if you know me enough, I like to take big challenges. So my last speech on stage was, oh, I'm gonna come back and build a company here, an outsourcing company in Ethiopia. Give me a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went back, things fast forward, right? Me and my co-founder, name is Hidori, say, okay, we need to go back to Africa. We'll pick Kenya and Ethiopia at the same time, but we'll stick with Ethiopia because Ethiopia is going to be a place where, one, competition will take a while to discover because there's so many barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Two, we can learn, which allows us time to learn. We're not going to go to Ethiopia to make money. It was impossible to do at the time. We're going to go there, build an ecosystem, and be it for the long term. Right? So we raise money. He put up most of the money. I put in a little bit more money. We moved to Ethiopia. And at the same time, we also created an office in Kenya, just in case. But then we saw the opportunities. We realized at the time, this was in 2016. People were telling me crazy. Like, bro, you're going to Ethiopia. There's not even internet connection. You want to build a tech company in Ethiopia? What's going on? You know, how are you going to survive with regulation? You have to bring a minimum of $150,000 at the time to create a small companies. How are you going to deal with the culture? How are you going to deal with the language? If you know who I am, I'm one of those entrepreneurs. If it's not challenging enough, I'm not for it.
All right.
I just came back from Japan for a conference. I was telling one of my friends when we were driving here that I was bored. There was no excitement. Because in Ethiopia and Addis, the moment you wake up, you get in your car, you see you may have a challenge with the police guy.
Yeah.
You park your car, you may have challenge with the guy who wants 10, 20 birr for allowing you to park a spot. You may have a problem with the macchiato, the tukur macchiato being not at the right thing. So the whole day,
Okay.
the whole day is challenge. Yeah. That's a perfect environment for entrepreneurs because everything you see is an opportunity. The question is, do you have the skin that's strong enough to stay the long course? Third is, are you here for just making money? Or are you here for making impact, but eventually the money and everything would follow? So that's my long answer to why Ethiopia, I hope.
Amazing. Amazing. I mean, the reason I asked you that question is because knowing Ethiopians and being one, I would think every young person from Ethiopia having the chance to study in the US and live in the US would only think of making it in the US. And coming back to Ethiopia takes a lot of courage. That's the main reason. So when we think about Africa in general, it was not a continent where you think opportunity and associate. Africa was that opportunity for very long time now. But now things are changing, I believe. I understand. But it is not usually people with chances or opportunities like yourself having that education in the US, having all those chances of meeting individuals who are in different big places and coming to Africa. There should be some reason, big reason, deep reason. That's the reason I asked you the question, and the answer is really fantastic. So I just want to stay around that area because it tells about who you are, your personality, and what you value. And you mentioned challenge. Do you really believe that the challenge that you face in different countries in Africa, for example, take Kenya and Ethiopia, is the same? Or I would think like you can ease up on the challenge if you choose Kenya, for example, or some other African countries than Ethiopia, because the regulations and other things that you mentioned are piling up every day. Nowadays, there is some kind of relief in that area as well. So I would imagine you choosing other places. That's why I focused on those areas. So do you think now things are changing, or what is the state of Amadou now and Gabea as a company in Ethiopia?
Yeah, I mean, things change drastically. So let me explain how we set up the company.
Sure.
I was in the mindset at the time to clone myself as many times as possible in Ethiopia to create the talent. Me and my co-founder, my role was to build the talent, right? I was a software engineer, worked a lot of opportunities in the US. Like I said, I was a solid software. I'm still give hard time to my engineers. That's how good I am. So my thing was to clone myself. The idea we had, once we clone ourselves and have enough software engineers or builders in a country, some of them would eventually be entrepreneurs. And that's why my co-founder came in, right? He was more interested into funding or supporting the entrepreneurs because he was a investor. That's how he thought of it. I wanted to invest more of what I believe, which is making Africa globally competitive. He was more like, you know what, once they're competitive, let me cut the check and make sure they go, right? So at the time, the first thing we did was we built a school.
Wow.
Gabea was the Gabea Academy. It was not random. Because when we came in, you remember, like I say, Ethiopia was seen like a tech Ethiopia. Kenya was a lot more advanced. So the challenge in Kenya, if I went and start up Gabea immediately in Kenya, my business model there would have been talent matching, making sure they get jobs, because that's the ultimate thing. In Ethiopia, you could do that, but it was too soon because we didn't have the trust that at the time, the kind of talent we needed to be globally competitive wasn't ready. That's why we built the school. That was the first step. See, if you talk about those two challenges, Kenya was ready. But then the challenges in Kenya was you're going to compete with everybody else who wanted to match talent. We had competitors there, DALA, Unicorn, some of these big companies. So your challenge would be more trying to catch up to those guys and raise money to compete against them. Versus in Ethiopia was, well, we didn't even have the talent that we wanted. Talent was plenty here, but the talent that we wanted to do that. Right? So that was the first step. Once we'd done that for a few years, trains hundreds, we navigated now to the next phase. Okay, you have hundreds of young people trained in the cutting edge technology, you need to give them opportunity. Because what's the point of getting trained? So we built a marketplace. That's where the name Gabea came from. We call ourselves the best of African talent. Find opportunities for the young people. At some point, some of the talent were making $3,000 to $4,000 a month at the time, 2018.
Wow.
All right. So, okay, we have capable talent, whom we train, whom can earn that much, right? What's the next phase now? Some of them say, you know what? I've earned enough, or I'm as crazy as Amadou is, and let me go create my own company. We came in and supported them from an incubation accelerator side, right? So those three challenges that we saw in the opportunity we create now takes us to another wave of what's next. What's next for me, for example?
Yeah.
My ultimate goal, after I achieve a certain level in Gabea, is to become an investor. Because I've seen all three things. I've seen how the talent, because I was there, I was teaching them. I saw what they're capable of building, and I saw that some of them are exceptional entrepreneurs. The question is now, we built an ecosystem that allows now to go a level up. I don't need to compete. My company doesn't need to compete with, entrepreneurs of these days. What I need to do is find out the next company that I can invest in. And then because I know that, I have more insight than a regular venture capitalist would look at the companies, right? So Gabea is in a phase where we're supporting entrepreneurs more than talent. The talent, we've done that already, is more of that part. Now, what does that mean? It gives you different sets of challenge. But this challenge of being, and it's good timing. You heard about the Startup Act in Ethiopia. Good timing. So any new entrepreneur who has an idea would have a chance to plug into our ecosystem, eventually, because it's all about an ecosystem, and eventually get funded or get the knowledge transfer that I have, or so on and so forth, right? So the Startup Act, it looks like we time it properly. We came in where training was necessary because the internet didn't even work. The government transition, a lot of things happened. Then when the internet started happening, we created a marketplace. After that, okay, we created now entrepreneurs. Now we're in a phase where, okay, now all of these things in place. What's the next level of Gabea? Let's support entrepreneurs as much as possible. But what do we need to pay attention to? Which is AI, which I maybe leave it to that. AI is the next big thing that Gabea is really tackling. We've been quiet about it, but weeks to come, maybe I'll reveal something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the next challenge. That challenge is bigger than anything you can imagine that we've ever done. Talent, I don't even think it's going to be a problem anymore. Entrepreneurs, we have plenty of it in Ethiopia, whether they're startups or selling and hustling, plenty of it in Africa. Funding is coming, but the ideas needs to be a little bit more refined. The private market fit must be more proven. We need to open up Ethiopia more for risk capital to come in, right? That's going to happen naturally because you built those things. But the next thing is, okay, how does AI play into this? And that's what keeps me up at night right now.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, the part about technology, we'll talk about it then. AI is one of, I know it's one of your passions, and it happened to be one of my passions as well. So we'll be talking about that. But I'm really interested to know what your experience was like when you arrived in Ethiopia, came to Ethiopia, and start interacting with people. Was it difficult? And is Ethiopia, you made the Ethiopia you imagined?
Yeah, it's the same. Very
Mm.
consistent.
Mm.
Very cultured.
Yeah.
Very emotional,
Mm.
whether it's bad
Mm.
or not. Hopeful.
Mm.
I think what keeps the country going is that hope. Huh?
Mm.
I think religion has to do a lot with it.
Mm.
I think the resiliency of the people has a lot with it.
Mm.
Now there's a new wave of mentality of people taking more risk now. It's very shy. You know, when I first came, people were shy, didn't want to speak up. Now, man, people are posting themselves everywhere, talking about themselves. So it is exactly where I wanted to be, because I wanted to be in a way where it's recognized to a point where some Ethiopian at the time was telling me, stop talking about Ethiopia, stop selling Ethiopia.
Mm.
That really bothered me. I said, I'm not selling Ethiopia, I'm just telling how it is. I'm only talking about the people I'm working with, right? And if they're doing great things, I'm going to promote them. That's who I am. Otherwise, I would have stayed in the US and claim, whatever. But Africa is ours, right? If I have another African brother or sister that I need to promote, I'll promote them. So it's consistent. Huh? And I'm glad I've been part of that story. Because I've seen a lot. That's why some of the diaspora who were born and raised in Ethiopia or who came back a couple of years ago, they come to me for advice.
About Ethiopia.
Yeah,
All right.
they have to, especially
Fantastic.
in the ecosystem I'm in, right? And I was saying, like, how does it, and the first thing I tell them, it's a long game.
Yeah.
You don't come to Ethiopia to make a quick buck. Now, if you lived in Ethiopia, you're entrepreneurs and stuff, you can make that. There's a lot of them making it here. But coming to Ethiopia is not long term. And the perfect example, the person who showed it to us, who's not Ethiopian either, is Dangote. He was one of the first one who took the risk to build a cement factory back in the day when he was having problems in Kenya because it was too corrupt at the time, right? Now look at the past few months what he did. Doubled down or tripled down on the cement factory, fertilizer. There was even a time where, you remember that trade-off he did with Ethiopian Airlines, So if the richest black man on the planet is in it for the long haul, who are we? That's how you gotta look at it. Whether you be Ethiopian or not doesn't matter. And he's in it for the good cause. He's not in it for aid, and he's here for the industry. He's an industry builder, right? We used to have someone like the Alamudi as well, right?
Yeah.
So those are my inspiration. Those are the one I look at. Now, if they fail, or they say, okay, Ethiopia, then you pay attention.
Yeah.
But if he comes down and triple down or quadruple the money he's investing into industry, which is the basics of everything you do in the country, you have to pay attention and saying, it's the same. It's been consistent. Ethiopia never sees people surprised. This is not gonna happen. This is gonna happen. I'm like, yeah, we've seen it before. We'll see it again. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Amazing. One of the things I'm really fascinated by you talking about is Africa. The last time we talked about Africa, you mentioned something about the Africa before our generation, or the generation that was prior to ours. And you mentioned something about Mali and things related to that. That was fascinating. That was deep. I believe I'm proud African, but the moment you told us about that story, I felt that I have to show it. I have to show my pride. Can you take me to that stage? Because I want the audience to be taken to that passion and vigor too. Yeah.
So I'm personally connected to Mali because of my grandfather, right?
No.
Trader, so there's a couple of empires scattered, right, across Africa. If you take, ancient Nubia and all that stuff, that's more consistent, but we're still struggling to make sure African understand what we had. But if you keep it contemporary, you got Ethiopian, right? A lot of empires there, even Meroe and all of those, Abyssinia and all that stuff. And one of the things that a lot of Ethiopians don't understand, there's other empires somewhere there. Because, you know, the pride of never being colonized and all that, you know, emperors and stuff, they think it just remains to, you know, among them in Ethiopia, right? You'll see Ethiopians or even Kenyans who don't even know that Ethiopia and Kenya share borders. You talk to Ethiopian, where is Kenya? Oh, somewhere in Africa. Kenyan, oh, where's that in North? They don't necessarily, because there's not a continuous way to circulate information. But if you look at the empire, just Mali, because there's many of them. There's Empire Ghana first before you even become Empire Mali. You got the richest man on the planet to date was the Emperor of Mali, Mansa Musa. I mean, everybody knows it now. It's everywhere on TikTok. How come we never talked about that? But by the way, he didn't become rich overnight. There was other emperors before him. I think about 4 generations before him. Now, what was extraordinary? At the time, it was one of the first universities, right, across that area. If you take away, like I said, the ancient history, it was the first universities, Timbuktu, right? Trade, the complexity on how business was being done, the complexity of Timbuktu. When we said that with Timbuktu alone, if you go to the library of Timbuktu, you'll be able to tell the story of Africa 1,000 times, including Ethiopia, because there was connection. It was not like disconnect. We lost it somehow 400 years ago. Now, this is 1400. 1400, so it's not, so it's about 1,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Close to it. So that emperor shook the world. The reason why they find out he was the richest man, he did a pilgrimage between Mali and Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, Mecca. And then on his path, when he passed to Egypt and all of those countries, he distributed so much gold that he crashed the price of gold. That's how rich this person was. But he was an emperor, large army, everything you can imagine, he had. But now the question is, did he pass through Ethiopia? Because at the time, whenever you go through Mecca, you had to pass either through Ethiopia or Somalia. That was the route at the time. So, or Egypt, when you went to Suez, So, when you look at that, all right, so we used to, and he was respected by the West. As a matter of fact, one of the things I believe is he made a mistake because he showed Africa so much at the time. Right after he did that, when Mali lost his emperor title, Westerners started coming in because it was broadcast that there's this land called West Africa, which was all the way from Senegal to Niger. That was the entire empire. Of this king of this land, they had everything. And the Arabs, traders, were the one that tell the story, like Ibn Battuta. They were the one that told the story about Mali because, you know, they circulated to whatever. So that created, and then the Portuguese came and the Spanish came because they were the first one that had the equipment to travel the sea and discover stuff. Even Mali, at the time, had so many ships that they sent ships to America, if you really, at the time, to discover the sea. Before even these guys, you get me? So if you look at all of that, say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Remember the thing I told you I wanted to rediscover my continent? That's exactly what it is. Because then you see the connection. Now it's not surprising that Dangote comes to Ethiopia and trade. Why would it be surprising? If our ancestors used to do that. Right? Whatever they covered in Ethiopia, where does the gold come from? Where does the salt came from? All of these different sort of things. Then it tells you, and the borders are so comical. You take some countries, some people are so proud to the borders. Let me pick a country I don't have anything against. Let me take Togo. So small country.
Yeah.
The tribes are there, probably in Benin, they Nigerians, everything. But because at the time, the colonial power saying this is Togo, you're so proud to be Togo. What does that mean? Those borders were created. We had empires before we had these little borders, these colonial powers, took over. So that is really what the setting is. Once you understand that now you need to visualize yourself. How long would it take us to get back to that stage of having or being at the center? Because we were at the center. During those times, there was dark ages in Europe, 900 years of dark ages, where they didn't have nothing in Europe. It took a few kings in, like I said, Portuguese to realize, okay, we can go to new places and discover new things and trading, right? Trade always makes sense. The economy is the basis of any power. They knew how to find the spices, whatever they need to find, gold, and take it back to Spain. Where did you find this gold? This. They started building ships. Next thing lead to another discovery, and then. So what if we can all wake up one morning and retrace everything that was going on? Just the same way as the Nile River was very powerful up to today, right? We know why it is powerful. The Nile, the Niger Nile was played the same role because it traversed all those countries of ancient Mali. That's how they were moving goods, because Mali doesn't have an ocean, but they annexed Senegal and Gambia. That's from the coast to bring in the stuff they need. That's where the Mansa, which is king, by the way, it's like Negus, right?
Yeah.
At the time, was having this ship goes to Europe wherever they wanted to go because they had ships. But the Niger River had the same purpose, the same 4 or 5 countries like the river that we have here between Ethiopia, Sudan, and so on and so forth. So anywhere you see rivers, usually you have activity, economic activity, because you're moving goods and services and people, right? So now the next wave is no longer these rivers, it's the internet. I mean, we took us a while to start adopting it, but it's going. I think Africa is the fastest growing in terms of the world, in terms of adoption of internet. So we have a chance at least to get there. The question is, what's in the internet that we can consume, use, and build up, right? Can we diffuse this information I just told you faster in schools in Ethiopia, right? Listen, yeah, and vice versa. Whenever you tell a West African Ethiopia, they don't know what Ethiopia is. They don't know there's a kingdom. That's why whenever somebody reveals something, they may have heard of Haile Selassie, but that was not the only emperor. They may never knew that it was never colonized, or some of these nuances, because the information is not flowing. And as long as we live like that and we don't even understand what's going on or what happened, we have no chance of globally competing. No chance. Because then the only person you think you can trade with in Ethiopia is America or Asia. But the same goods America and Asia needs, your neighbor may need it. For example, Ethiopia has the largest cattle numbers in Africa. Every year in those countries I just mentioned, they have shortage of cattle because of heat, where you need to slaughter sheep and stuff like that. What if we can find a corridor where those sheep in Ethiopia that's abandoned here, or cows, whatever, to be circulated? I've been trying to be into the meat business for a while, and that's one thing. I'm just waiting for the opportunity. But you see, because I understand what those people in the West need, what Ethiopia, and vice versa. West Africa has a lot of shea butter. Shea butter is the ingredient that you use for any beauty products. Where is the Ethiopian getting the shea butter from? Maybe China. You never know. You know what I'm saying? There's few things, but once you understand those nuances between how Africa used to trade, what are different routes, how the cultures are. For example, somebody was telling me Ethiopia is one of the few countries in Africa where you carry your father's name and your mother and your grandfather's name, right? So if your name, but Niger does the same thing. So you see people whose name Amadou, because his father was named Amadou, his grandfather was Amadou, because it's similar in terms of that naming of thing. Where otherwise in other African countries, let's say South Africa, you have a clan name, right? Your clan, right? So all those so there's similarity in things. We just need to understand. We need to dig deeper, and I think this is time to do it. Instead of strategically just always reacting when America does something or Europe, but now it's happening. I think that people understand that. Okay, let me talk to my neighbor. What country in Africa produced the stuff that I'm buying in the US, and what are they? You get right, and Ethiopia can be one of those countries that can set the tone, because there's so much freedom because of the non-colonial part. The fact that Amharic is so unique to Ethiopia is the only country where you can speak it, except the US if you're in Washington D.C. or whatever. There's a lot of things you can do without necessarily raising any alarms. Because the moment you speak English and French, things goes out. You know what I mean, right? You could be set. We could set. That's why me and Hiroi, when we built the company, we said, let's start in Ethiopia and eventually go everywhere in Africa. We wanted to build it similar to Ethiopian Airlines. Where did it start here? And then Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie get together and say, okay, let's make sure all African countries are connected. Because to go to Ghana, you would have went to Brussels and come back, right? You get right for any African country, because Brussels Airlines, right? Or British Airways, I'll take it back. So they said, that's why Ethiopian Airlines, one of the first things they've done is connected all African countries. Once the success started happening, they started, America was one of them, of course, because of the relationship that. But look at how Ethiopian Airlines built this company from right here, right? And that's why it's not as surprise as the most,
Definitely.
That's how we wanted to build. We even had a map at the time in my office where everything started off in Ethiopia. We conquered Kenya, we conquered Senegal. We were at some point in 30 African countries in terms of talent.
Mm-hmm.
We had a pool of 55,000 people. But I'm learning all of that stuff to say is the question you're asking about history brought me to think that way. But if you don't know, an Ethiopian will be scared to say, what is Mali? I don't want to go there and trade shea butter. But if you know how big that country is and what you can do, and the different kinds of people, they don't look the same. I was making a joke that you look like a friend of mine, right? You got the Fulani, you got the Hausas, you got all different tribes, right? That is what I wanted to connect between what you asked me about the history and the way I think in the, in that sense.
That I believe you can make anyone fall in love with Africa. I mean, I could hear you talk about Africa maybe 24 hours, then I'd be thirsty or maybe need some water or food, but I can hear you talk about Africa the whole day, whole night, man. It's amazing. We don't have that in our DNA. It's not something that we prioritize. So growing up, what we have is this narrative of the need to talk about the UAs, how basketball is dominant, how hip hop is doing this and that, and trying to emulate, look like someone from that part of the world. So we don't have this thing. I mean, next to my country, there is this country that has been doing all these things for this long. I don't know about it. Nobody taught me about it. My kid, the one growing up, is watching a TV and trying to emulate someone from Britain or America the same way I did, or the same way a friend of mine did. So we need individuals like yourself in huge numbers, in great numbers. Yeah, that's really inspiring. I mean, that was amazing, man. God bless you.
God bless us. Thank you for having me in this thing to discuss it.
So let's come to the technology part, because I mean, for the last 1 year and a half, about 2 or 3 years maybe, we were here. I was here following this trend or hype of AI. So it was coming from part of the US, maybe Silicon Valley, people investing in companies around there. And I didn't know that this thing is a thing in Africa too, until I met you. So tell me about that vision.
So here's the story. The story is very simple. The world think Africa is very much behind AI. But I'm going to flip the script in a certain way. The global ecosystem around AI is not ready for Africa for 3 reasons. Reason number one, whatever the models they building, it doesn't serve us. When you ChatGPT, Gemini and stuff, it's not built for us. It's not going to solve our context of problems. That's the first thing. The second thing is the LLMs, right? They don't pretty much, let me put it like, the use cases behind those LLMs do not apply directly to what we do.
What is LLM?
Large language model.
All right.
So ChatGPT, OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, all of these Grok, all of these things you understand is just large language model. So you it's like Gen AI. You talk to it, like you used to, right? Yeah. So those are not fit for Africa. Like your regular person won't be using ChatGPT to do certain things. It's not to solve their problem, right? But it may solve someone who work in the US or that kind of thing. So at least it's not there. People are adopting it, but the use cases we have, for example, if you wanted to ask, right now you can ask ChatGPT about certain healthcare issues you have in the US, it'll give you some answer. But ask the same way in Ethiopia. Or even if you ask in Ethiopia, does it speak Amharic enough to tell you? That's what I'm saying, the use cases, right? Are not there. The last one, the ethics. The ethics that's built in these models or this global ecosystem of AI can't govern us. There's a famous lady named Timid Gubruk. She's Ethiopian.
All right.
she's been talking about, she's a scientist in the AI field. She had an issue with even Google. You can look it up later.
Yeah.
She's been talking about ethics from the get-go.
These
These models are not built for us. Forget, they're not even built for people of color, whatever they call in the US, let alone Africa. So there's a very disconnect. So why are people saying Africa is not ready for AI? These things are not built for us. What I would say now is, I'm opportunistic in terms of challenges. They're wrong. We need to create our own opportunities. And the way you do it is a couple of things. The fundamentals of how do you build an ecosystem of AI starts with the infrastructure, the compute power, the data centers that allow you to take those large language model, LLMs, and make them run into servers. If you notice, when ChatGPT was born, nobody talked about building these heavy infrastructure. Everybody was pretty much stable. But because the compute power of just ChatGPT and Opera was so much that they needed to create new GPUs, right? They needed to build new data centers. You even see some of the big guys like Microsoft, Google hiring a bunch of people, to take that money and reinvest it into data centers, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at it that way, from the GPU compute power of we don't have that in Africa. I mean, Ethiopia is one of those countries a bit interesting where we have compute power for Bitcoin mining. You know that.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have the compute power for LLM because large language model requires a lot of compute. Although you have someone like the Chinese who built DeepSeek that built in their own context again, you see, right? ChatGPT was not built for the context of China because they couldn't get the GPUs, right? They went and built their own with the DeepSeek. And so the infrastructure is the first problem that people say that's why we're not ready. The second thing that they think we're not ready for is the LLM. Because to build an LLM, it requires different kinds of things. It requires talent. It's not programmers. Yeah? You need data scientists, you need mathematicians. Those formulas and those complex, I'm just trying to word it down, right? Complex model needs a different way of thinking, right? So that LLM things, I haven't heard any country in Africa or even entrepreneurs that they're building their own LLMs if it's not technically linked to, the bigger guys, right? Just because you need the right scientists, or if you're doing it, you're keeping it quiet because you don't know. Even if you build it, where would you host it? Because if you don't have a data center, let's say Ethiopia, we don't have a data center for LLMs. If someone was attempting to build LLMs, guess where you're going to let it sit? Somewhere in the cloud, somewhere in Google, somewhere these things, right? In that sense. So in that regard now, if you look at it even from our languages, which is the biggest thing. I know Gemini is trying very much to speak Amharic, right? ChatGPT. But what about the rest? And who's training those different kinds of things, right? So those three things make it the infrastructure for why people say we're not ready, right, is a burden. And no country will prioritize building data centers, LLMs, and building the talent for it if your priorities are something else, healthcare. You get me? Africa is very practical, which is what makes us seem weak, but at the same time gives us strength. Because if you don't take care of a population of 130 million people and you worry about certain things, you may come off in kind of way, right? But what we need to do is allowing the talent, again, this is why I'm going with young people, to build applications, the entrepreneurs specifically, on top of these models. I don't mind that. I don't mind a kid coming in today, create an application that sits on top of Gemini to help translate Amharic to English. Because the more applications you have, which is built by entrepreneurs, the more relevancy for the government to pay attention. So wait a minute, where is this data stored? Okay, wait a minute, we need to have our own data center. Okay, good. We have our own data center now. Wait, the LLM is too big. We can't download these big things. Can we build something we call now SLM, which is small language model? The small language model are contextual. You can use a small language model, for example, for the educational system in Ethiopia, for every kid to have a tutor assistant on their phone. So if they learn math, they go to class, whatever. But if they want to get some extra tutoring, they open their phone, launch this particular app that sits on a SLM again, small language model, and it teaches them. You don't need the entire ChatGPT for a kid to learn the math that's in the curriculum in Ethiopia because it's very small, right? ChatGPT is for the entire curriculum of the world, which is heavy. And on top of that, that phone that he has may not have steady connection. So the SLM, if he has a good phone, can actually sit on top of that compute power, the GPU that sits there. You see how contextual I'm making it, right? So we need to accelerate the creation of application on top of AI and what we on top of this big LLM at first. We call it agentic AI. Meaning you pretty much take a layer on top of a layer, right? Once that accelerates it now, it'll be an incentive. For example, one of the things that happened with the crypto thing in Ethiopia, that's what happened, yeah? A lot of people were trading, and it creates so much nuances and things that, okay, then the same crypto guy went and say, we can bring some opportunity for Ethiopia for crypto mining, and it lets for another one. And the government is making quite good money in terms of electricity, right? From selling the electricity to crypto mining. That's how I see it. We don't have the money. We don't have maybe the knowledge, full knowledge, without selling ourselves short. We don't have the even the political will to dive into the AI world if we don't have use cases. You get my point? The guess which country has the largest number of users in terms of AI right now? Wait, let me put it this way. Guess which country has which country has the biggest number of users on ChatGPT? Guess.
The US, maybe?
Guess again.
Canada?
Go lower. Go to further.
Okay.
East.
All right. Maybe China?
Stick in the middle. You went to west, went to east, stick in the middle.
India?
Closer.
Indonesia, maybe?
Closer.
Malaysia?
Closer to our borders.
Morocco?
No, but further east. It's a neighbor. It's one of our neighbors in Germany.
Kenya? Really?
Look it up.
Kenya?
Kenya has the most number of users on the planet on ChatGPT. Now, here's the danger. What is our number one way of communication in Africa? Let's just take Ethiopia. Which platform do we use to communicate fast?
WhatsApp.
Or Telegram?
No, Telegram. Yeah.
Well, let's take WhatsApp. Who owns WhatsApp? Facebook.
Facebook owns
Meta.
Yeah, Meta.
So Meta owns Instagram, owns Facebook, owns WhatsApp. We're indirectly training the model that they have, which is Llama, because we're feeding it everything. If you open up my WhatsApp right now, you'll see my mom communicating with me, my sister, kids, my wife, everybody's communicating into WhatsApp. What do? Send each other messages, voices, our languages, different languages, all that type of stuff. And it's growing. So which means in the next couple of years, we would have given the entire way of the way we think, the way we... Meta can predict what will happen to Ethiopia in a year based on the conversation we have on WhatsApp. Think about it.
Wow.
And some of the government officials on WhatsApp. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, definitely.
So if somebody is saying certain things and let's say we pass each other a certain message, I can predict what's going on in the country. That's WhatsApp only. Let's go to Google Gmail. How many of us have Gmail account? Each of us that have an Android phone, by default, you have look at iPhone, because iPhone is even for luxury. They're already doing that anyway. They're training their own AI and stuff. That's how Siri was with that. So what I'm saying is our data is colonized, but we don't know how it's going to be used, whether it's malicious or in a good way. If I can predict your patterns of whatever you're doing on my platform, I can predict what I can do. Just like if you take back in the day, the same warfare was being done, right? You know, the Romans, some of these big guys who did big things, right? They look at patterns of things, right? They have information flowing from everywhere to make decisions. That's how they end up being, you know, the largest empires, like British Empire. They knew everything because they had, you know, posts and spies and, you know, all of that stuff. This is a different type of way of us. I'm going to even say this. You know how like some of the Africans back in the days were sent to the US, right? Well, that's what we're doing with our information. The moment you have an Android phone, everything you do on that is being monetized. And it's being not even monetized because they can't sell it back to us. At least in the US, if I have an app, I know how to I can sell it to, you know what I mean? I can sell you've been in the US, I can sell your data to a marketing company. But here, if you're Ethiopian, what they do here, you can't sell it to a marketing company. They can't sell us anything, right? We're not going to buy that. But it can trace a lot of things, right? Behavior, what we're talking about, our sentiment on an app that doesn't belong to us. Now you understand why I say we need to build as many. Ethiopia should have its own version of ChatGPT. Or forget even ChatGPT because we don't have the data infrastructure or the LLMs, but at least our own version of WhatsApp. Right?
Fantastic. I mean, I'm always skeptical about this big companies based in the US and other places, but call me naive, but I was not that upfront to think that our data could be sold in that way or harnessed in that way. And
if you only knew.
That is mind-blowing.
If you only knew. Or it can be tailored to one country or another. If you're a country, you have an enemy, and I'm the head. I can go somehow, I don't know if they do that or not. I'm not accusing these companies of anything. But if I have a way to understand what is the sentiment of my population right now, right, based on if I am accessing that data, it allows me to be more proactive, more strategic on what I move, right? And so that's the danger of AI right now, is the fact that the only option we have is have as many young people leverage on top of the LLMs, on top of the model that exists, and build as many applications. One of them would shine. Let me give you an example. Let's take Ride. Right? Ride had so much problems setting up. Remember those days, right?
Yeah.
But the moment you set up, guess what? Become successful. How many ride companies do we have right now? You see, all it took is one. But fintechs, I think some of the first one before the Chapa came, there was a couple guys who tried. And as soon as, it takes off, right? It's the same principle. There's a kid out there, we don't know, in Ethiopia, or a bunch of kids who building stuff on top of LLMs you don't even know because they don't have a voice. And guess what they're using? They're using the cloud. They're not using necessarily our own data centers. But those people need to be identified in the country and support them. The Startup Act actually needs to look at anybody who's building anything on AI right now will support you. Why? Because sooner or later, somebody is going to create something so amazing, right? To go that. So you don't need coders anymore, in a sense. You need people who build things. And there's tools out there that allow you to do that. Unfortunately, again, we're relying on other tools that exist. It's been tested. I have no context, right? One of them is Lovable, Cursor, some of these very famous things that allow you to, you just prompt in in English primarily, you get stuff. Okay, well, how does that contextualize? What if I'm a 12-year-old kid in Hawassa, I don't speak English properly, or I don't even type properly, I don't even have a keyboard. What is my option of building my first website? That's the application that needs to be built. That way, that kid will not have a complex of inferiority by the time he's 20, because he would know how to engage with AI by using an AI agent to allow him to X, Y, and Z. So that's one of the things we remember when I was telling you we built a platform, which I'll announce it here. You'll be the first one to hear it.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about it.
Definitely.
If you're interested.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So you mentioned that these LLMs are not actually built for us. And I was thinking about Claude or the other ChatGPT and the other ones. And I was thinking about how my friends and myself used all these models and got our information and helped with different kind of writings and everything like that. So that was a help we accessed. That was a support that we got. So can you justify the point that you say that these are not built for us? I used those. My friends used those.
You're an individual.
Yeah.
You speak English.
Yeah.
You're in this ecosystem of needing to write paperwork and, like you said, create something from Claude. What about that kid that don't speak English? Okay, and plus you send your information to Claude.
Yeah.
Do you really think they're going to keep that information or that data private for you? Is it? And you know how like when sometimes you prompt any of these tools, especially for images, when the image that first comes up, like if I ask it, give me an image of a software programmer, you think they'll bring someone from Ethiopia?
Yeah, a white kid will pop up. Yeah.
Or give me something specific to the laws of Ethiopia. Would they bring it? No, because those are general purpose technology. It's like Google. Like Google won't bring all the websites. But how many times have you used Google in Ethiopia to get certain things in Ethiopia? You never do. What do? You call someone. Because nobody's on Google. The internet in Ethiopia at the time when I moved here, it was called Facebook. People didn't know what internet meant. I'm not talking about the software developers, the most sophisticated guys. I'm talking about your regular guy. He called Facebook the internet. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's what I mean, but it's not built for us. You don't use Google to do certain things in Ethiopia. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah.
You use it in the US, it's more practical, businesses, but it's not. So you always have a gap. My point is you always have a gap. Those who have access to these credit cards to pay for Claude, to play for Gemini, or even access the Forex to do that, then of course it's for us. Because you're a diaspora. Right?
But me, I'm not.
You look like one though. But you have access to those things and you are informed about Claude.
Absolutely.
You're informed because you're in a sector. But that kid who's in in a university somewhere, he may not know what Claude means.
No.
So that's my point. Now, you can, that's what I'm saying. Let's not be too selfish, but I have access to it.
Yeah.
When I mean us, I mean the whole country. I mean the whole continent. How much money did you see lately that the United States invested in data infrastructure for AI? You saw what Trump promised. Even take small countries like Saudi Arabia, how much money they putting up to build. You get my point. This because they want to control that stuff. And the fact that you're sending your information to Claude instead of sending it to a model that exists for Ethiopia for the benefit of Ethiopia tells you there's a problem there. Claude will keep on getting better and knowing everything about Ethiopia that you send it to, every file you send it to. Well, fine, good for them. But how do we, that's why people are saying we're not ready for AI because of the way you just phrased it. The way you need to be ready for it is, okay, is there a kid who built a version of Claude that's contextual to what I do? Let's say you build an AI agent for the law in Ethiopia. Why would I go to Claude to find out if there's one that's local that I can ask the law and it answer me? Why do I have to? ChatGPT right now knows some of the laws in Ethiopia. But guess what? The more we tell it, the more it empowers it. I used to tell my software developers back in the day when I was training them 8 years ago, one day you'll be replaced by AI. Nobody believed me. Nobody believed me. This is truth. And you're going to ask anybody who's we call them Gabayans. You ask them, it said that, but nobody believed me. But now, massively people are getting fired because of AI. Because we were feeding the information to AI. Every time you prompt ChatGPT and tell it to do something, it records it and train itself. But I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it only benefits OpenAI or Microsoft, those guys who own it. It doesn't benefit the nation. So you're at the mercy of anything. If we all adopted today ChatGPT for everything we do in Ethiopia, we have no country. Forget it, we don't even have a continent at that point. Do you understand? Because you can't predict anything.
Absolutely.
Everything would be dictated based on what you... That's what I mean by us. If it was just me, like I told you, I wouldn't be here. I'll be in the US, making my money. The us is more, how do we solve these kinds of challenges?
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned something about coding and issues related to that. Are you saying coding is obsolete? Oh,
not necessarily. It's the way you do coding. So traditionally, the way you do coding, you learn a language, a programming language, and they serve certain purposes, right? There's what you call languages that allow you to build something in a backend, a database, etc. There's languages that allow you to build mobile apps. There's languages that allow you to build websites and so on and so forth. And if you even look at the story of coding, at least, from some of us in our generation, the interface of website were very ugly initially. I'm sure you experienced it. Even Google was very ugly because there was no this higher level of languages like HTML5, some of these sexier languages allows you to build things very nice, So it's progressing. And coding a website right now is really not the use of your time. You can go to ChatGPT right now, tell it in 30 seconds, build me a website, It doesn't build it. It'll give you the code, but you still need to assemble it, put it on a server, making sure you have a domain, all that particular stuff, right? So people will figure out, that's still tedious. If you start a business right now, you have to wait for 2-3 months for your website to be up and running. It is very painful for business. What if I can have my website up and running in 2 minutes? That's the speed, right? Just like back in the day, our grandfathers were taking camels to move around thing. Now you take an airplane, you can get from point A to point B within an hour or 6 hours, something like that. So there's something now we call agentic. You use agents to code, just like you use ChatGPT to ask questions. You can use now these agents to allow you to code. So that's the new wave. That's why I was mentioning this. So not coding anymore. You're telling the computer or the agent in this case, not even the computer, I want you to build me this. And you can prompt it as many times as possible in order to create you something in 20 minutes versus going to school, learning all of these languages and learning how to assemble it to build an application. That's what computer programmers usually do. They get all these different languages, you learn nuances of hardware and that stuff, put it all together and then create an application, which would take, back in the day, it's going to take a year to create an ERP, to create this, to create that. And they mess up the requirements. Then you start, all the stuff is over. You can be live very quickly with a few lines of prompting in English. Okay, cool. So we're like, okay, we're going to miss that wave. If it takes a kid 3 months to learn how to code, they may not necessarily even build an application. What if we can teach these people how to build stuff? Right? Okay, can I give this kid a tool that in 2 minutes he builds his own first website? That's what we call vibe coding, some of these terms, right? But then, furthermore, let him use his own language. Let him use Amharic to tell the agent to build something in 5 minutes. And have it up and running and share the link to his friends. Say, guys, forget even building a website. Can we allow a 14-year-old kid who doesn't have video games to use his father's phone or wherever to prompt it in 2 minutes and create a game that he can play with his friends? You see the power of that? So that's one of the projects we're working on. It's an alpha version. We call it DALA. DALA. You heard it here first. People will try it and see. The only reason why we did it, there's a lot of tools like that in Western, America, Europe, and all that type of stuff. But again, what did I say earlier? They're not built for us. That kid, for example, will never hear about those tools. 2, he may need a PC. 3, he may have to have a credit card that allows him to pay across borders, which we don't have, right, from here. 4, he doesn't speak his language and is not mobile ready. So all of those 5 challenges tells me those platforms, whatever they build, that's not for us. It may be for you because you have access to a computer, but for those kids, that 70-year-old kid doesn't have that stuff. If you remember the story of Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, they all started coding when they were very young. Well, why don't we now allow these kids to have this tool to build their first product and sell it or whatever they want to do, right? That's what we built. If you do it properly, push it to the right schools and stuff like that, within 6 months or so, you can have 5 million kids who build 5 products. Whether it's to build a website for their dad or sell a game or what have you. That's the power of these AI applications I was saying. Now, those kids now will be introduced to those tools. Okay, why stop there? What if I'm a comic creator or I want to create comics, right? So I just came from Japan, right? Signed some partnership there to make sure that comic books are created in Africa. And then they're also being published in Africa. Let me give you an example. There's a couple famous comic book creators in Ethiopia. They tell great stories. Primarily, diaspora buys it because we can't buy a credit card unless they bring it to the bookstore here. But that story is not known in Nigeria. Tons of comic book creators in Nigeria, they may never be known in Senegal because they speak French. You see the problem?
Yeah.
So the reason why this Japan thing was, okay, let me see how we can have all potentially the comic creators in the continent be on the platform, communicate, sell, blah, 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 at the same time bring the Japanese thing. Well, what if there's a kid out there who wants to create his own comic? There's a lot of stuff involved in creating comics. You have to create it. First of all, you gotta know the story. I found out there's some Japanese creators that I met in Japan that told me it took them 3 years just for the script. You know those manga? Just to agree on a script, because they have so much competition. You can't just come up with something and make money from it. But what if this kid now has a story? He feed it to this tool. Say, you know what? Here's my story. Refine it for me, just like you would do with ChatGPT. It spits it out. Cool. Okay, create me a script for my comic book. And all of this stuff he does in his own language, by the way. Oh, create me the first characters. I want this king. I want this. I want that, right? Oh, by the way, put it in the digital format. Oh, by the way, create a website for it and make sure my friend buy it for 200 bir. A copy. Oh, by the way, make sure it's available on Telegram as well. Imagine. Oh, by the way, make sure my comic book is seen in Ghana. And make sure it's English there. It's maybe Amharic. You see where I'm going? That's content creation. Yeah. Okay, so you can go same thing with tutors. Right? So you can go in any level, right? If you use these tools, if you allow these kids to start creating, the world now is about creation mode. The role of the government is to be ready for it for three things, like I say. The infrastructure, being ready to host the LLMs in that infrastructure, and making sure these population I'm telling you about, which is what I care about, these young people, to create as fast as possible. Create. That way we can justify the cost. You can't justify the cost right now in Ethiopia or any African country to build data center for GPUs that cost billions of dollars. What is that? It doesn't make sense. But if one of your, let's say, particular sector is healthcare, and you want to make sure every household in Ethiopia has this device that can be the first, the first access to healthcare. You know how much lives you can save? And all it takes is a device that has the right GPU with the right SLM, right? And then, of course, all the regulation around, things about the data. That's why you need a local data center for that. You can't have that sit on somewhere in the cloud. It has to be locally, to a local data provider, right? You know what that's going to do? Having just an AI agent that's your healthcare. I'm sure you have an Apple Watch, right? No, you don't. You're one of the few guys.
Now I have this fancy one.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
Is that a TSAT or? But a lot of people are using these Apple Watches for healthcare. And Apple now is building on his phone, whatever, your first virtual doctor or something like that. We should beat him to it, because why? You know how many citizens are put doctor in his country? You had Solomon from Life.
Yeah.
We don't have enough doctors. We'll never have enough doctors at this rate. You understand? But can we have something else that at least, it may not be the final doctor, but a tool which can be built by a kid. What I just described can be built by a kid if you give him the right device to install it in. Where's that kid right now in Ethiopia? Can we find him? Where's that kid in Africa? It doesn't even have to be Ethiopia. It can be somewhere else, right? Same thing with education. We have a pretty bad educational system right now in the country, right?
Yeah.
What if the teachers are supported by AI agent, or the kid has this device again, right? But you can negotiate in terms of where to build it, how much it's going to cost, maybe reach out to NVIDIA, whatever you have these funders, whatever, do something. They allow every kid to have this tutor. Because kids right now they're not going to read books. Yeah. But if they learn something in class, can they go and feed it to the agent, and the agent reiterate it, explain it further, and give an example further than the teacher can do? You see where I'm going with this thing? Okay.
But I want you to go deep on that part, because we're facing this problem in our school systems, and not only that we face this problem, but whatever our kids are learning is not of ours. It is something from the West. And on top of that, what worries me most is this kid's going to a school which resembles one of the schools from the West, comes to their house, their homes, and starts actually watching a TV that is produced by some of the Western nations. I don't blame the Western countries for doing that, but still, my kid, I want him to understand the struggle of his people. I want him to understand the context of the life that he's living. Leading, or his parents are leading, and know what is what. in the continent of Africa, in the country Ethiopia, but I believe these kids are detached. So is there any way that the language models that you were talking about can help this kind of children?
Absolutely.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Absolutely. Not the product we built,
Yeah.
right? But if the product is successful, I'm hoping others will build those applications. I'm hoping that we now come and start creating our language model, the big ones, or the smaller ones, actually. Let's start with the smaller ones. When are we going to come together and saying, let's build a small language model for the educational system in Ethiopia, for history, when can we build, now to build things that they see on TV and stuff like that's a little more difficult. You need a larger model because it requires a lot more compute powers and all that type of stuff, right? But that's the key. But unless you have a national way of saying it, and I believe Ethiopia always can do that because the government, the way it functions is mandates. All right, tomorrow everybody has to do X, Y, and Z, and you have to. It's just the way it is, right? But building these contextual small language model is the key for us to solve some of those problems. I was telling that the future of Netflix will change. You have Netflix at home?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes you argue with your wife what movie to watch, right?
I watch it on my phone.
Your phone, okay.
Yeah.
So you don't watch together.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you, man? Okay, all right. Let me use myself. My wife, sometimes we argue. I like certain kinds of movies. She likes certain kinds of movies.
Yeah.
And we just say screaming, and then we realize, let's forget it. All right? What if Netflix, if they don't do this, I think they're going to die. What if I can prompt Netflix, just like a Trump ChatGPT, and say, listen, I like this kinds of show. My wife liked this kind of show. I want you to create a new movie for me, right? And have Denzel Washington being the main actor. That's going to come. You believe me? And he'll be like, okay, buffering. You know how you buffer 0.9 to 99%?
Yeah.
So your movie's ready to watch. That's the future. That's why we need our own context. Then that kid can create his own story and tell his friends, or create his own story and come tell his parents. That is the power of these things that we're talking about here. So visuals, right? Building applications, healthcare, education, agriculture, all of this stuff is possible. It's just that, okay, who's going to build that first pilot, the first MVP? Just like ChatGPT was MVP. We all jumped on it when we heard some influencer talked about it, we jumped in. And guess today, you can't live without ChatGPT. You don't even go to Google anymore. It's a waste of time, right?
A waste of time.
Right?
Yeah.
From one application, the world changed. Didn't change. It was already there, but accelerate past 2.5 years. So that's what we need to encourage. Then you solve the problem because it's an equalizer now, man. If you have the general purpose technology of an equalizer is for everyone. Nobody should struggle in math today. No child should struggle in math. Any problem they don't understand, they can feed it to ChatGPT and tell them, can you help me solve this problem? And memorize it. They can still go to the test and still figure it out, but it's an assistant. It's like having a buddy tutor next to you. No child should suffer in math. Now, the question is, what kind of math do you feed it to? What's the curriculum of math of Ethiopia? You can even ask ChatGPT to make it better, contextually to what you want. But ideally, I would want us to create our own model, different from OpenAI, different from ChatGPT, to do this stuff.
I have other questions, but okay. I want you to talk about the model that you're coming up with, and tell me a little in detail. I mean,
the DALA product?
The DALA.
Oh, okay.
I mean, is it accommodating all the things that you're telling me, or is there any different characteristics about it? Or tell me.
Right now, it's just for building applications.
All right.
Web applications.
Sure.
Right now, because you start somewhere, right? And I'll tell you how it happened.
Yeah.
When this movement of vibe coding came about a year ago, I keep telling the team, you need to get on board with this AI thing. This is the engineering team, my engineering team. Told them we need to adopt this thing. We need to move faster. I can't afford now. You're telling me one feature will take 2 weeks, a month, and so on and so forth. I want for you to give me a product quickly. I can test out there, and then we refine accordingly. So long and behold, these products started coming in, and we use one of them called Lovable, right? And we all tried it. To a point, even our chief operation officer, Lul, used it and built a dashboard for himself for his operation with no help. for someone who haven't coded for years. Our chief impact officer, who has no clue, no clue about this thing, build our own Mena, right? Build our own thing. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at these guys like, guys, you have no more excuse. And she built it in a day. So I'm like, okay, all right, great. It's great because we give guys credit card to, like I said again, to purchase those access to those accounts. Then this brought back what we came to Ethiopia for, that globally competitive. You know, we're at a certain age where we're going to add value, maybe or maybe not. All we have is wisdom. And now ChatGPT sometimes is wiser than us. These kids now, take the Gen Z down. Yeah, they're different.
Yeah.
Well, what can really get them there? They need to have access to these tools. So we said, okay, let's allow every kid who's in high school up to university to build their first application using a platform. But we won't use Lovable because they can access it anyway. That's how we come about. So we said, all right, let's build our own version. So we start first using large language models because that's what we have access to, right? You know, it's broken, a couple of things here and there. And then it only spoke English. So I'm like, this is not going to work. That kid in Makele needs to speak Tigrinya, so he has to be able to do something. That kid in Senegal speaks Wolof. You know what I mean? We need to have something that, and by the way, he's going to do it on his phone. He can't have a laptop. He doesn't have a laptop. They don't even know. Some of them never seen a computer.
Yeah.
But we have a phone. That's the fastest hardware on the continent in terms of adoption, internet, and, you know, telebill, all of these type of things. Everything is already there. You have the internet, you have the hardware, you have payments. Let's build something that a kid can pay 50 to 100 birr to build their first application. So that's the context it is. Now, once we're done with the coding and building, that's why I'm saying I'm ahead of the team. Can we allow kids to build comic books to tell their story? Mansa Musa should be, we just talked about it, it should be told to you, you know? Let a kid in Ethiopia learn that story, create in a comic book, and sell it digitally to kids in Ethiopia for 10 birr a piece. You see where I'm going, right? And then we continue. But right now, the reason why we went coding, because we know coding very well. That's what we did. Guys all know about software development. So we shouldn't only I shouldn't use my credit card to pay for my staff for external tool. Let's challenge ourselves. And that's how we built it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Definitely. The other thing, when you talked about Mansa Musa and the other things that we have, for example, you've been talking about Emperor Haile Selassie and all these big figures in Africa. These are stories that are told. Some of them are our history. Because of our history, we know about these individuals, but there was a selection part of it by people writing history of the continent. And they want you to know about some part of the continent as it is depicted today. Maybe poverty is attached to it, or ignorance is attached to it, all kind of bad things, stereotypes is attached to the story of Africa. With AI, do you think that would change?
Oh, yeah. It's changing right now. It's changing. Everybody knows about Mansa Musa right now because of AI. People take the content, they just recreate it. They create images of him. Oh, it's going to change quickly. Good news with Africans, at least one thing we never lag behind is content. Music, Amapiano, Afrobeats, everywhere. You go to Japan, you go to a little pub, you'll hear Amapiano, and just like hip hop was. You remember how hip hop took over the world? Amapiano, and even Americans are collaborating now, right? Burna Boy is one of the biggest artists in the US in that genre, right? So that's not a surprise. The good news is we know how to create content. So once you know and you know the source, all you need is a tool now to put it out. Just like I said, that kids who learn, say, about, you know, Menelik, like King Menelik, whatever, right? He can very quickly create his own story. What's stopping him? One, knowing about him. Two, having the hardware to do it. And then a tool to actually put it out there. Because you know how to sell it. Kids will know how to sell it. If you have kids who goes on the street and shine your shoes and make 20 birr, believe me, if you give them the tools that they need, they'll go out there and, you know, do what they need to get done. So it is inevitable. That's why I'm saying it's the greatest equalizer ever. The problem is, if somebody today, let's say Google, went crazy and said, you know what, we don't like Africa anymore. Let's kill Google in Africa. Let's kill Gemini in Africa. Then we won't be able to. You understand? As a matter of fact, there was a time what really slowed down some of the growth of some of the entrepreneurs in Ethiopia for mobile app, we were being kicked out of Google Store. I can name at least 5 companies who've been, us, including us, because Ethiopia was never on a list. So when you pick up to deploy your app, Ethiopia was never on the list. Lately, it's been there, but if you do certain things, kick you out of the store. That's my point. Meaning, one day, Ethiopia can do something. The U.S. government say, "What? Hey, right?" Or Gemini, no more. Then what are we going to do? Let's say we're all dependent on Gemini. What are we going to do? You can't work anymore. That you remember you were bragging about using Claude and stuff, right? Right? So how do we prepare to have our own Gemini and Claude?
Yeah.
That is the challenge for us in a country and as a continent.
Do you think we'll make it happen anytime soon?
Build the apps, create the euphoria of app. Like I say, ChatGPT, all this thing came faster. People said Google was dead when ChatGPT was key. You remember?
Yeah.
Those guys woke up very quickly and say, forget search, we're just going to go to Gemini. You get it? So something has to trigger it. But if we just wait for the government to create, they don't have no reason to build data centers for AI right now. So what? Who's going to use it? But if that grandma uses AI in the village somewhere on a smartphone or device to help diagnose a kid, guess what? That alleviate the pressure on the healthcare system in Ethiopia. At least you know what it is. If that kid that's in school right now don't have access to books, but you give him an AI agent, you don't need to give him books. Give him an AI agent to learn and train himself around it. You alleviate a burden on a tax, whatever expenses on education. I'm probably being populist right now, but you see what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur. You want to build something to disrupt. In order to get to a point where we have our own Gemini, I firmly believe that we need to have a lot of entrepreneurs building stuff that's relevant for the country using AI. No more, let me build a mobile app. Nobody cares about mobile apps. I predict that your phone in the future, give it a few years. What do you have, iPhone or Android? iPhone.
Yeah.
You won't need any apps anymore. You just need an AI agent to talk to it. So for example, you'll say, I need a ride. It'll tell you which ride company do you want to use. So you don't have to install ride on your, you'll just have, ride has to open up an access for you, right? Your device to order a ride, to ride directly to the infrastructure. You don't need to open ride, open this app, open that app. That's what's going to happen. That's what OpenAI is actually building. The ultimate, is building right now, the ultimate AI device. Where you just talk to it. Either you type or you talk. Book me a ticket through Expedia or the cheapest competitor you have, Expedia have to go from such and such. Okay, and tell you, okay, cool, I got it. What kind of which credit card do you want to use? Oh, everything is going to be virtual. You don't need to carry a physical credit card. And it doesn't have to be just a phone. It can be something, you know what I mean, on your ear, whatever. That's the future. Keyboard is going to be dead. It's going to be dead. It's almost dead. You use your phone most of the time. You don't use a PC anymore every now and then for it. It's going to be dead soon. So if that's the case, let's beat them to it. Let's create that leapfrog. Let's make sure kids, certain age, get this hardware. Us, the entrepreneur, trust me. Those people who are listening to me right now, watch. If they listen to this and they're entrepreneur, in the next 2 or 3 years, they'll build you hundreds of application agents that can do what I just described, which will create a shock to the system where governments, policymakers, and even funders will say, oh, we got to go create this data center in Ethiopia, just like the Bitcoin mining came. We have to build it. Why? There's so many apps. It's choking. And then all of a sudden, the telcos now need to worry about it. Like, okay, there's too much bandwidth. It's a different battle, right? That's what I want to see. Remember you asked me in the beginning, what do I want to see? I want us to see the shock in the system from the young people.
Wow.
Using AI.
Wow.
Then things will change. Tell it, when was the last time you carried cash?
I don't even remember.
A year and a half ago, we were carrying stacks.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's possible.
Man, I'm really scared about the whole thing. Let me tell you my reason. The things that you've been talking about are really interesting, very amazing. Having this posh life was or easy access to everything that you want, and you can order anything and everything any minute you want. That's so fancy. That's so convenient. But I follow this thing for the last 3 or 4 years, maybe, I don't know, but some phrase keeps coming now and then. This universal basic income thing. Maybe you heard of it. So this is my understanding that at the end of the day, when all is said and done, when everything is accomplished in the world of AI, it won't be necessary for people to go out and work and accomplish, achieve, or anything. Like, everything could be accomplished by this AI agents and the other things. So I heard Elon Musk and the other big guys talking about universal basic income. So the concept is, I believe, the concept, you'll be chilling every day. You'll be doing whatever you like to do. Go to the beach and relax, and you'll have this amount of money for your survival. You'll survive. Maybe, I don't know if you can thrive in that world, but you'll survive. You have money. So I'm scared that people with that world happening, I don't know how I can survive, or any one of my friends can survive, because there is value adding or addition of value in the work that you do, and getting some kind of meaning from the labor that you contribute towards whatever engagements that you have. And devoid of that, I don't think we can have any reason to live. Do you really believe that a time where this universal basic income will be a reality, will be a reality of our age?
That's a Western mindset, brother. That's the problem. I want to know, what are the Chinese thinking? I never heard them say it about universal income, blah, blah, blah. Right? That mindset, you remember what I told you, that the global AI ecosystem for me, it doesn't work for Africa. We need to find what works for us. One of the issues we have is, at least, we haven't built the infrastructure that we need, right? Remember, that was clear. The LLMs,
Absolutely.
It will take us a long time to build this stuff. That's going to create enough income for any African country for a while, right? They're already worrying about building the infrastructure. That's why they have that problem. We don't, right? But then again, let's go back in ancient time. How did we used to trade? How did we have jobs? Did we even have jobs? Think of it that way. I don't box I know enough to not box me. While I hear Elon Musk speak, all I'm saying is this: if this dude goes to Mars, Africa is obsolete. You know how? Mars probably have natural resources beyond our imagination that's maybe even more powerful than what we have right now. You believe me? If you have oil here, you're most likely to have oil there. So Africa would be obsolete. All of this, so we're the richest continent, right? Because we say it because of our natural resources, correct? But if that individual, whoever is behind him, go to Mars, they don't need us anymore. You see? So that's my problem. So when I hear him, I see him in that context. Now, how do I make sure, at least not even worry about the way they think, but how do we take care of us? That's why another thing now, why I watch much more of because I'm a technologist, people think I would lean towards Elon Musk or some of those guys. I stopped. Because the problem I'm solving is more of an infrastructure problem. I have all the talent in the world. If we had the internet 50 years ago in Africa, and we're the pioneer, where do you think we would be? Right? Reverse it. What's missing right now is the infrastructure. That's why I follow Dangote. When you have fertilizer and you're an exporter of fertilizer, you better not have problem producing more food in your country. If you have roads that move products or goods, you won't have problem accessing remote areas. You have connectivity of internet. That kid now, like I said, can have an AI agent tutor that can accompany him while he's studying. So I don't want to get caught up into that conversation. I watch it, I listen to it. I'm selfish about Africa. And I'm like, okay, what would my ancestors do? What would Mansa Musa do? First of all, he gave universal, he gave everybody money. Take Daffe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've done something.
No.
We're not close to what those. We are 1,000 years in terms of way of thinking from that kind of mindset. What can we do different? Why do we even take the advice? We know, I'm not saying, they're taking care of themselves. Why always take their advice? Why can't we take our own advice? That's what we've been doing. That's why we haven't been doing. Ethiopian Airlines is one of the powerhouse of airline industry in the world. You think they listen to others? They have a plan. It was a vision from the emperor, right? They had a plan. And they're executing it and moving slowly at their own pace. They're not copying anybody else. Oh, customer service sucks. Okay, cool. Go fly that airline. But I'll get you there. And maybe cheaper. Right? You have a choice, right? So my point is, let's look at things as we can copy or learn from the past rather than, who knows, what if you can talk about all that stuff, but what if there's a comet that hit Earth in 100 years? It may be possible. What if there's another pandemic? Let's just worry about how would we solve this problem. But universal thing doesn't even, then you're turning people into zombies. That's what you would.
That is what I'm afraid of. What I'm scared of.
But in Ethiopia, would you ever be a zombie? When you come out the streets, you're right? You come out the street, everything's a problem. And so many problems to solve that you never stand still. You'll find something. And remember, the population is young.
Yeah.
See, us, we've done enough. I think that if you and I, something happened to us right now, people will say, hey, these people, they did something.
Yeah.
Right? Now, can we do more? That's what we talking here. But these young people, they'll figure it out. But can we empower them?
Where do you draw your motivation from?
It's been a couple of phases. Every time I walk in the streets of any African country, when I see a beggar, that's what bothers me. And now you see there's a lot of them anywhere I go. Dakar, I go to Nairobi. Ethiopia now is because the population side is flourishing. I'm not comfortable. That's why I told you when I was in Japan, I was bored. I was in London too. I was like, these guys, they have different problems. But that kid, I have children. You know what I mean? And nobody cares. You see how much people talk about these different places like Palestine and stuff. Nobody cares about the Congo. That's 100 million people. It's the third largest population in terms of population country in Africa.
I don't know that.
They beat Egypt.
Wow.
So Nigeria, us, and Congo. Look at the DRC. I find out recently, a guy came to my office, a friend of mine, he was in visit. He said, what's the greatest product I can take to the Congo, the DRC? I showed him DALA, the product. He's like, man, I can teach every kid in Lingala. So he started doing it in Lingala, and the thing came back. We're about to sign a partnership there. Oh, I can get IFC to fund this. I'm like, let's see how we can do it ourselves. But it is what it is, right? So who talks about DRC? All the lithium, some of these things that people know that. We all know that.
Absolutely.
The charges our phones come from there. So that's what makes me uncomfortable. So before I leave this earth, I'd rather make my mark. That's why I came to Ethiopia, because it's hard. At the time, it was hard. It's still hard, you know that. But now it's a little bit better. Right? I know for me, at least, to do business or to do impact. But for others, there's a lot left behind, right? So if you don't see that, if you come out and some kids pull your pants and ask you for things that they haven't eaten all day, it bothers me. Right? That's what motivates me.
I mean, when you talked about the whole thing related to technology and AI, and you actually brought Africa up a lot, and I was thinking, will there be any time where we see Africa being how you imagine it to be in our time? That's what I was thinking. I mean, I know your drive, I know your energy, how actually driven you are. It's really big, it's really amazing. Do you think most young people can understand what you're talking about and we can achieve this?
We'll see the comments. There you'll see. Some kids will be like, yeah, I was waiting to hear what this this kind of topics. Now, in our lifetime, no. But it's inevitable that we'll be on top. Why? We have the youngest continent. When you have the youngest continent, it means you have the youngest consumer that can consume the future. But what do we put in their mind? It's inevitable that Africa would be on top. You can't change it. There's a lot of things we dominate right now. Entertainment is us. And sports. The most popular sports is more Africans in that sport than anywhere else. Just football, soccer. So it's inevitable. But because we've been lagging behind of the infrastructure we need, like I say, if we had internet 50 years ago, Africa would be different. And let's even put it a different way. I used to believe that Africa was one. I don't believe that anymore. It's detrimental, actually, because it's too complex. Even Ethiopia is very complex. Is what are the different countries and what are they doing and who's leading what? Like Ethiopian Airlines has done so well that other African countries are jealous. Like, we're going to do ours. That's what Rwanda Airways did, right? Even Nigerian Airways, when Ethiopia wanted to buy them, like, hell no. You get me, right? So you need inspiration. But if it doesn't come from Africa, nobody going to follow. So it's the inspiration that we need to put in. But it's inevitable. We'll be on top. But you and I, our job is just to set the tone, set the foundation. If we're teaching today kids to go to school, no, teach them how to go to school to create his own thing and sell it. That's more profitable, or that way, otherwise he'd be in a universal thing, right? To get there. Now, he has the luxury of learning. The future of school, what does school do when you go to a classroom? You have a social construct, which is you have a teacher, authority, you have friends, you have people to bully you, all of that stuff. That's what makes you human. You interact with the social. So school is important for that aspect. Sports, one of the stuff that make you social. The other thing is learning. I predict in a few years, you don't need the learning part. You don't need a teacher to teach you history. You need a teacher to keep you in the social aspects. But you're going to need something, an AI tool to teach you whatever. You can't argue with your kids anymore. At least with my kids, they look it up on ChatGPT. Come back as daddy, you're wrong, right? So even in my own field. Right? So you see my point?
Absolutely.
What kind of foundation do we need to design to allow, even the Gen Z is a little bit lost because they're in a battle of, they can't find jobs. They're trying to do what we did, but it doesn't work out for them. Gen Zs can't buy houses right now, loans and all those different things. It's very difficult for them to, the transition is very difficult. But the younger one, the one that can be immersed into this thing you just talked about. Okay, and they'll do it with or without us. But what can we do? Right? What can we do as an individual? What can we do as a nation? What can we do as a government? And not necessarily saying, okay, the US is doing it that way, or they saying this, therefore. No. That's what made the power of Ethiopia, by the way. Ethiopia is, at least the country doesn't jump into conclusion because the West said something. Some African countries do. Ethiopia will take its time. You know how long it took for a second telco to come in the country? You know how long we still don't have foreign banks? Because Ethiopia wants to make sure they understand the game first before they... Now, it may be detrimental from customer service or certain services, right? But it takes its time. You know what I'm talking about? It's always taking the time. There's an old guy over there that just say, wait. Yeah, let's not rush. This foreign just comes in and, take over certain things. I think the only thing you can't wait on is food. You need help. That's why the lack of Gates came in, because people need to eat. Otherwise, you go back to education. You see, they haven't brought anybody yet. They say, wait, how do we fix this first? Yeah? So that's the advantage. Any other African country will usually jump into, except Rwanda. Rwanda is a bit, they just jump into, all right, let's, because for whatever scenario. So that's the advantage. But it's not going to last forever. Sooner or later, you're going to fall into this global, and whoever is the next leader, whatever the decision, we don't know. But can we prepare our children accordingly?
You mentioned books. And I don't see these days young people being really passionate about reading any kind of book. Maybe it's because I'm away from the areas where books are really popular. But I don't see, even in my surrounding, people being really enthusiastic about reading a book or anything that has to do with books. Do you advise against it? Advise against reading books, or what is the thing that you've been talking about, and what do you want to underline on?
I lost that battle a few years ago. I even created a little library in my office where I have books that I encourage every staff member to come and borrow. And it worked the first 3-4 years. Eventually, these people don't read anymore. The Gen Z are worse. Reading? Even forget the Gen Z, even the millennials, they're allergic to reading. It's a waste of time. Yeah, so now, I always said, you read a book, you read somebody's life. Mm-hmm. Somebody who take the whole time to build his life and put it on paper for 10 years. That knowledge, you can get it, if it's, I say, 200-300 pages, you can get it in a week. And then that's how I got to even have the kind of brain I have about Africa, because I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books, right? I still read, by the way, but now I use Audible mostly. Again, you see?
Yeah.
So, but kids will come and say, well, I can find out the information ChatGPT very quickly. I can get a summary of Elon Musk. ChatGPT. So what does that mean? Of course, scientifically it's been proven that we're going to use this sort of way of the way our brain works, and I don't know what's next. That one I would be worried for Africa, because how do you communicate stuff to allow kids to have a certain kind of brain, right? Not necessarily, again, being builders and stuff. That I worry. The fact that, but maybe there's something else that's going to substitute the reading to get you there, right? Faster. Humans now want things faster. That's the norm. Patient is not, right? It's not. It's a nice to have. Everything is fast for this generation. They want the gratification right now. You know what I mean? There's no, what's the point of now staying in a company for 5-10 years to gain experience if I can go there, work for a year, get what I need, and move on. Right? So it's a very, very different environment where reading, even writing, reading, man. People do emojis, left and right. Yeah. It's like, I will have fun. So I even think that those billions of nodes that fuel these LLMs, what the criteria is, right? When they send it to the LLM, will disappear, because you won't need all of that, bunch of words to formulate what you're asking the AI. Maybe you just get a couple of thumbnails, and I don't know. I'm just going crazy here, or the voice would be the main thing we do. I think speaking would be the main thing we do. That's why that's why I'm confident for Africa, because of the languages we speak.
Fantastic. The thing you mentioned about communication and WhatsApp, that's still in my mind. I'm thinking about it. Do you think we have any instant solution for that? I mean, for people like ourselves living in Ethiopia, interacting the way we interact, and doing everything that we do, we are accustomed to actually follow whatever instructions that are given via the application WhatsApp or Telegram, that any one of this communication ways that we use. Do you really believe that there is a solution for us, or are we expected to pay it to the companies that are in the US and give all our information for them to be robust, big in any way they want?
What was that app before WhatsApp? What did you use?
There was before WhatsApp. There was, I forgot the name of this thing. Viber. Yeah.
And why did you use it? Do you remember?
I forgot. It was a long time ago.
It was to communicate with your diaspora friends.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it was a necessity.
Definitely.
Okay. Why did we stop using Viber after a while?
It was not as convenient as WhatsApp is, maybe, or...
Yeah. Okay, what is Ethiopia using today?
Telegram and WhatsApp.
Yeah. WhatsApp is more for you, but Telegram the majority.
Yeah.
Some of them, the first communication app was Telegram. And why does people jump from WhatsApp to Telegram? Do you remember? It was very, very important time in Ethiopia.
Maybe privacy or something, security related
It was
issues.
the internet.
The internet. Oh,
The internet was
all right.
cut
Yeah.
off for Viber and WhatsApp. The only one that worked because it was not detected was Telegram.
Wow.
I was there because I've been here 10 years.
Yeah.
So I've seen it.
Yeah.
So you see the switch. The switch is out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
The only solution is there must be a crazy entrepreneur out there in Ethiopia, or a bunch of them, to decide to build our own version of WhatsApp. The question is, are we going to support them?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Because right now, even Ethiopian Telecom or WhatsApp or Safaricom can build their own WhatsApp version because the day-to-day data is hosted locally. Now, people may say, "Oh, I don't want to use that app because Ethiopian Telecom may be whatever government related. Safaricom, yeah, I don't know, you know what I mean." But those guys can even create. I would trust them more for the future I'm talking about than WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
But let's let the private, because those guys, they don't need then LLMs and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's have entrepreneurs. I would challenge even some of your viewers to name one of the entrepreneurs. We can support him, and you can bring him here. Say, have you built a version of WhatsApp? Yeah, okay, cool. How do we support you? You know how these apps were very viral, the Lovables and some of these things?
Mm-hmm.
They support each other. Some guys went as influencer. I just tried this app. It created my first, website. I'm so excited, and it went viral. It was not marketing. You never saw marketing for ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Somebody told you, right?
Absolutely.
What if there's these guys who built ChatGPT? WhatsApp for Ethiopia, Telegram for Ethiopia. There was a company called Hologram that started it off, but then changed it. What if we can support those guys? And how come the government couldn't say, all right, you know what? Build it. We'll give you a sandbox, just like they do with the capital market. We'll give you a sandbox, see how robust is, what do you need? And so that's how you do it. Remember what I told you, though? It's the only thing we can do right now. We can't build a data center. We don't have the money, the priorities. It's the apps. That's the only way. Somebody built ChatGPT. Telegram was built in Russia. Still, the owner is, he's been in,
Yeah.
So it was necessity. So now if we introduce a new app into the market and say, oh, by the way, you don't need to talk bad about WhatsApp and Telegram. Oh, by the way, we have another way. Maybe it does it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe it's more contextual. Mm-hmm. People will take it. I would use it.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Oh, let's wait for that time to come. Maybe it is. Maybe it's next week, or maybe it may take us a year. Maybe I don't know. But I want that time to be tomorrow. If that is, something to happen, that should happen tomorrow. Because myself, my friends, and people I know, we do all kind of things using WhatsApp or one of this Telegram, maybe. If it is not safe that way, and you have to be really cautious about what you're doing in that platform, in that communication application. So you have to be really cautious about it. That's a big thing. So the other thing I want to know, and I want you to tell me about, is how long do you think it would take an African to believe in Africa? Because all we think about is not Africa. For example, an Ethiopian who is with a big amount of money or cash thinks about other places in the Middle East, maybe Dubai or these other fancy places. A Nigerian or a Kenyan who is affluent thinks about somewhere in the northern part of the world, or North America, or somewhere in the Middle East, to have extra home than have a house in some part of Africa. Do you think there will come a time or a day where these guys would think of some neighboring African country? It could be to invest, or to think of having a second home, or having a second business.
It only happen if that other country is comparable to wherever, like Dubai and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. You can ask yourself a question: which country, if it wasn't Ethiopia, which country would you move in and feel comfortable? Not necessarily be a hustler or entrepreneur thing. Which country? If you can't answer that right now, then it's very hard to answer your question. Mm-hmm. But if you had given an opportunity, you would move to Dubai in a heartbeat, because it gives you the standards, right? And those countries are good for people who've made it and want to retire, in my opinion. Like I said, it's boring for me to live in Dubai, right? For those who still want to play the game will still be on the continent and will keep fighting. Again, a very good case. If you're really confused about this, always look at Dangote.
Mm-hmm.
All of his money, all of his fame is in Africa. He doesn't have palaces in London or some of these places. He reinvests everything. He could have invested in Google and some of those guys. He could have invested in NVIDIA, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Some people approach him and say, hey, why don't you cut a check for NVIDIA when they were, or some of these companies.
Mm-hmm.
But he invests in what's necessary for the continent to shine.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some of us that it's not like everybody. Good news is a couple of things that were happening. Like, for example, in Kenya, there's a lot of Ethiopians. I'm sure you have friends who moved there.
Yeah.
Because it gives you the standard that the frustration you have here, you may not have it in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So Kenya is becoming that hub for the East Africa, as it is actually, for people to go in, great schools, standard of living is decent. And Kenyan keep to themselves, the culture is not that shocking, right? You can fit in right away. As long as you speak English, you're good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's happening, right? I think in West, there's been a lot of Nigerian who moved to Ghana because Ghana is a little quieter. They can structure things. A lot of investment going there. So there's people who pick their battles, right? Where it's already happening. You just don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
You get me, right? But how long would it take? I don't know. Because unless you have, let's say now Ethiopia becomes the next Dubai in the next 20 years, then maybe people will come to Ethiopia, right? Because the prime minister is into building. That's his, So maybe he'll build it fast enough to look like Dubai for people to come. I don't know. But it's not just the infrastructure, but you also need the opportunity because people only move here if maybe they can buy a house, which now you can do as a foreigner, the kind of things, right, to allow you to move. So if I'm in Kenya, why would I move to Ethiopia? If a Kenyan told you today I'm moving to Ethiopia, you're questioning like, why? That's not, But are you in here to add to the value of the country and allowing us to get better? Or are you here just to live like Ethiopians who move to Kenya because they buy a property, they live? You see, it's a very tricky question. I don't have the answer. At least from my perspective is I will never do that mistake again because it's not a mistake. I mean, I've done it out of necessity, moving to America. I was even born in Europe. Makes it worse. But I'll never go back to that thing because it's not the future. Europe is not the future. America won't be the future. The future is here because of the youth population. The thing. So I rather look at countries, right, where I can, right? Ethiopia is my home now. It's been my home forever. But if I need to move somewhere else, it'll be another country, right? It's not necessarily going back to America. It doesn't make sense. My mindset wouldn't work. What would I do in America? At this stage, probably Trump put me as a deportation. Although I'm not having U.S. citizenship. You know what I mean? So I wish that people who hear me would fast track what we want, which takes the risk to go to another country and add value. Because when we go to Dubai, we don't add value, right?
Yeah.
You just live off of somebody else's success.
Absolutely.
You go to America, same thing. Well, America's different because it's the land of the opportunities, right? You can be, we've seen some of our brothers and sisters who made it. Like DC is, if you go to the mayor's office in DC, when you call,
I've been there.
You see English, habla español, va mariña, right? It's there. So that tells you that at least you can add a lot of value because it's the land of immigrants. Nobody is true Americans except the Indians, right? Whether you came in 200 years ago, 100 years, or 10 years ago, as long as you get your citizenship, you add value. That's how the country, that's why it is the most powerful nation in terms of concept, although there's a lot of problems there. Now people are going to China, by the way, but mostly for trading. A lot of Africans, there's actually little Africa, I think, heard in China's, things like that. Why? We can't, and at least for our generation or the one even right after us, we can't sell out anymore. That's the problem. The more we make those moves, the more we sacrifice. Unless we go and come back. If the idea is to go back, get something, come back and do something, like some of the diaspora, if you just go over there and flex, and who cares? Nobody cares anymore, right? Where you are, it's just what value do you add in? So if you don't add in value, just keep it to yourself. At least that's my philosophy.
Wow.
criticism, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what value you add?
Mm.
Criticize me all you want, but I'm here struggling. I'm here adding value of touching up lives. Yeah. That's why I don't, you know, man.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
All right. Would you say you disproved your friends or some of the people that actually doubted you when you come to Ethiopia to be who you are today?
I don't even remember them.
Really? Tell me about that.
I don't remember. I think the only person that was very, very supportive, was my mom. Like, yeah, you guys is in your blood. Just figure it out. You were born in Europe, and might as well, just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get the mom's blessing, it just happens. But I don't function that way. I never seen people as competition. I see my vision as my competition. I can't see anybody else, or he's doing this like you. Okay, we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to do that to move forward. Whether you against me, and you do something, or I'm with you, or you're with me doing something, I'm not looking to say, like we say in the US, kumbaya, doing things together. No, that's not how the world functions. That's not even how nature functions. Everybody has his own path. But I wasn't like that. Huh? Mm-hmm. It's only when I realized that passion. You see, when you get to passion that's bigger than anything else, who's your competition? Or who do you listen to? Right? So you would have probably thought that I listen to all the tech giants that are, Dangote is my person. Because we're in the same wavelength. He just happened to be African and he cares about what I care about, right? So you see, I switched that. I was not like that. I was a big computer science guy. All this, following this engineer, that engineer, that kind of thing. But I realized it doesn't fit into, right? So people disapprove, yeah, sure. Right? Maybe they're still around, maybe they're not. But the work that I do speaks for itself. But not for my personal gain, for whoever I think. At least one thing is for sure, is never for personal gain with me. I'm not there yet. Even some people say, now it's time for you to really do your thing. I said, I'm doing my thing. Because if I didn't have this passion, I said about 15 years ago, to really start looking at Africa, it wouldn't make sense. So put yourself in my shoes. Who would you think, if somebody disapprove what you do, how would you react? Would you really, all right, cool, I'll listen to you. I'll take your thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But is what you telling me aligns with my vision? Are you here to help me get there? Or not even help me? Are you here to support me? Either way, I'm going to try to get there, and that's where you need a higher power, right? You don't necessarily need people to, guide your parents did a good job raising who you are.
Absolutely.
Then you went and got jobs that shape you intellectually, experience, resilience. Then you become an entrepreneur. You learn everything myself. Entrepreneur is the most lonely space ever. Everybody will tell you crazy. Everybody tell you it's not going to work. Right? That's why only few make it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. What's next for Gabea? Like, I'm thinking, are we thinking of the next unicorn coming out of there? Or what's next for Gabea?
Yeah, the unicorn thing is what haunting me, man. I really want to forget even Gabea being the next unicorn. We need a unicorn out of Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. The reason why it unlocked the trust for other investors to come and support. I always give the example of 6-7 years ago. No, longer than that, actually. Very few people wanted to invest in Nigeria because of the reputation that they had, fraud, and stuff. There's a couple of things that happened, but one thing that was significant when the first unicorn was announced, which was EnterSwitch. So similar to ET Switch, and billion-dollar company. After that, people started saying, because they have so many resilient entrepreneurs, people started getting things, and now VC started coming in, and then the rest came in, right? You got the Paystack, you got the Flutterwave, you got Andela, Money Point, they keep piling up because now foreign investors are seeing it as an opportunity. Ethiopia, I don't even know how much money we raised the past 5 years since I've been here. Maybe $50 million in the startup ecosystem. 50 maybe total. Mm-hmm. Now, in other sectors, yes, a lot of investments. But in the startup sector, how many companies are worth $20 million? $50 million, very few. So investors are still looking at it as a risky place. So one of the startups or entrepreneurs in this country needs to really crack the unicorn status. I think Gabay is in a good position, at least in a new way we're thinking in terms of the agentic AI, because that's the next wave of investment. The most traditional way of startups that got money and went on is fintechs, logistics, commerce, right, or marketplaces. There's some good ones that got money for climate change and right. But the next wave is very few companies are raising good money for AI stuff, maybe because they just piggyback on all the LLM. Maybe they're not explaining the story yet. But I think the next wave of investment in Africa, because like I say, it's easy access, except for the infrastructure, it would be on AI. And if we position, some of these products and some of these thoughts, right, we should be there. Because one thing we're very good at two things: talent and technology. We can build anything, right? So the key is, are we lucky enough to have a product that have a huge product market fit across the continent? If we have that, once you start touching the 100,000 users, 1 million users, then there's no doubt, right? If you have 100,000 users, people using it, people come back and say, all right, how do you monetize it now? Or how much money are you making for it? And then eventually you'll get investors that will get you there. So we're not very far off. We just need to prove a little bit more. There's other companies who actually should be unicorns by now. I don't want to mention name because I don't want to make people think it's there, but we need a unicorn out of Ethiopia. Imagine you wake up one morning, such company is worth $1 billion as a startup. You change the game. Because traditionally, the $1 billion companies are what real estate, right? You change the game. Even policy would be born out of that. I was hoping Ride become a unicorn. I'm still disappointed she hasn't reached out to certain Uber could have made a unicorn, because that's what they did in Dubai with that company called Kareem. Kareem was locally things. They grew in Dubai, right? Eventually, Uber came and bought him for a couple $1 billion. That would have given so much help, because Samrawit, right? She's a bona fide Ethiopian entrepreneur. She has all the challenges. If I had challenges, I'm a joke compared to her. She was a woman, graduate computer science, went through so many hurdles to create a safe place, a safe way for people to get a ride. Think about that. And build a company from where she is. Of course, she had support from the investors, and she got investors that would allow her to have this mentorship advisory, but she should have been the first unicorn. But now competition came, right? You got the Angles, you got the Ferris, and those guys, which is healthy competition, but she should have been the first. I think.
All right. This is going to be my final question, but I could hear you for the whole day, man, as I've been saying. So you're amazing. So I really appreciate you doing all these things and being who you are. But is there anything that stands out from Ethiopians that you see and that amuses you, or you are taken aback by something, some different characteristics maybe that we don't notice because we were born and raised in Ethiopia and feel that a different thing?
Supporting each other is the biggest handicap for, at least in my ecosystem. Everybody wants to claim things for themselves, which makes it very hard because Ethiopians don't trust doing business together. So there's a little confusing things, Ethiopians, but when it comes down to it, very few companies will work together, which is one of the things that created sort of so much frustration for me. I'm an ecosystem builder. Everything I do, I make sure people participate. Whether you're in or not, but it's that, like every great ecosystem is not built by solo entrepreneurs claiming things. You have to come together. You see, like when you ask me about Gabay Unicorn, what's my first reflex? One of us has to do it. And I gave you right. That's how I think. Because if she becomes a unicorn, it indirectly helps me for what I'm trying to do. And eventually raise money. I wouldn't suffer this much to raise money if she was already a unicorn, I bet you. Because she would have proved that marketplaces exist and blah, blah, blah is functional. So it's that frustration of, and I understand where you come from. It's not like you go to the US, Ethiopians are not like that. It's the environment that dictates it. I have so many friends who are Ethiopian. Now I even realize they're Ethiopian now. Before we didn't think of it that way. You know, but here is just that sort of, you know, you can claim something, but behind the scene, you're just afraid to partner with this person. It's more of that fear, or maybe it's going to take, you know, and because of the mentality of scarcity. Right? My wife does that, by the way. She's, you know, no food is wasted, you know, that kind of thing, right? I love that. So it makes you ground, like, okay, let me hold my ground. But every now and then, there's a come together, right? Even if they come together, it may not last long because somebody is going to say something or do something that just messes the whole thing up. We won't have a unicorn. We'll have a unicorn faster, or at least I'm always talking about my ecosystem, meaning tech and startups thing. Because we haven't come together. We should pick one company and support that company. Then guess what? We all fall from it. When they called about PayPal Mafia, there was one company called PayPal, right?
Yeah.
Elon Musk came from it. All of these guys came up with their own company. Who's the richest man right now? I think it's Elon Musk. Everybody, of course, all of them have shares in it and stuff like that, right? That mentality is not here. By the way, it's not in a lot of African countries except Nigeria. Nigeria, some of the entrepreneurs really work together. They compete, but they don't. It's not, oh, I'm talking bad. No, they don't do that. That's not because, you know, it's a whole pie. The pie is big enough, right? That is what frustrates me. It's all about, you know, in a corner or looking at, you know, because of the mentality of scarcity. And it's going to continue as long as people still don't have basic needs and things like that. That's the only thing. Everything else you see in everywhere. By the way, that's not only Ethiopia. There's other countries, the same thing. It's just the scarcity mentality in African countries that people don't want to work with each other. I've seen it in Senegal too. Yeah, everybody's just, the ego is too big, right, to come together. And then you realize you're talking 5 years and nothing happens. But if you held hand to somebody else, right, and say, okay, let's do something together. Because you're never going to raise money by yourself anyway. But can I hold on and build something together where we can raise, and then eventually you either acquire me, I acquire you, that kind of mindset. It's not here yet. Yeah, that's the, I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you resonate with that?
Yeah. But I'm actually, I was thinking, am I like that? Oh, do I like working with people, or I'm a loner? I was blaming myself when you said all those things about Ethiopians and other Africans. I was blaming myself the whole time, but I'm starting actually to adopt the mentality of working together, collaborating, and actually accomplishing something because of the collaboration I forged with people. So I'm working on that, but I still blame myself.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I appreciate you, man. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
No worries, man.
All right.
Appreciate you.